Hello everyone, my name is Keith, amateur radio call WD4PTJ, and today I'm going to tell you why this should probably not be the first ham radio that you buy. So you've taken the technician test and passed, you've waited and the FCC has finally issued you your call sign, now you're a legal ham, ready to get on the air, but you don't have a radio. So why would one of these not be the first radio that you should go out and buy? First, let's get you familiar with the terminology. This is what hams refer to as an HT or a handy-talkie. Most other people would call this a walkie-talkie, but hams refer to it as an HT, a handy-talkie, or a handheld. As a new technician licensee, you're going to have phone privileges on 10 meters. You're going to have some digital and HF, digital and CW privileges on some other HF bands, and you'll have privileges on 6 meters. But what we're really addressing here is what most new hams, most new technicians will be drawn to: the 2 meter and 70 centimeter FM bands. Talking through repeaters or talking simplex. So that's what we're really going to be talking about here, is radios, first radios that you could get for that. If you're already ready to jump right into getting on 10 meters and some of the other bands like that you have privileges on, if you're ready to spend that money and ready to do that, then this is really not the video for you. This is the video for people that just got their license, like most new hams, and they're looking to get on 2 meters and 70 centimeters. The question hams get asked all the time, no matter what type of radio we happen to be using, is how far will that radio talk? What's the range of it? And the answer we have to give is, it just depends. So with an HF radio, like I have over here, the radio waves are bouncing off a layer in the atmosphere and coming back down hundreds or maybe even thousands of miles, which enables us to communicate for great distances. But with VHF and UHF, and this is a 2 meter VHF radio, that signal is going in line of sight. It will just continue to go until something stops it. It's not reflected off the atmosphere. So what does stop it? Well, buildings, hills, terrain, vegetation. That's what will be the factor that will determine how far a VHF, UHF signal will go. So it's not going to always be the same. It's going to depend on where you are and what's between you and who you're trying to communicate with. So I would say on average, a handy-talkie like this, communicating with another handy-talkie, you'll probably do good if you can communicate 2 to 3 miles. You know, that's probably going to be about the limit of what you can communicate with a handy-talkie like this. Now that's talking one radio to another, which is simplex. And when we're talking about talking through a repeater, which is a radio that's set with an antenna up on a tower at some height, and it retransmits the signal from this radio back out. Well, your range is going to increase then how far I could talk with this. I could get into a repeater. Once again, all this is going to depend on things like terrain, the height of the repeater, the antenna on the repeater. But I could extend that 2 to 3 miles out, maybe as much as 10 miles or so. Now I know some people are going to comment, some hams are going to comment and talk about how they've hit a repeater X number of miles, I don't know, 30, 40, or 50 with a handheld. Well, that's probably the exception to the rule right there. Perhaps you were at a good high elevation yourself. The repeater that you were communicating through was on a mountaintop somewhere. But on average, you're not going to talk a really great distance getting into a repeater with just a handy-talkie. So what type of radio can you get to talk further than just what that handy-talkie will? The radio I have here is a dual band radio. It operates on 2 meters and 70 centimeters, and the output power of it is 50 watts on 2 meters and 35 watts on 70 centimeters. And keep in mind that the handy-talkie that I showed a while ago only puts out 5 watts. Most handy-talkies will put out 5 watts. You may find some that they will say will put out up to maybe 8 watts, but that's really not going to make a lot of difference even if it is putting out 8 watts. So if you have a radio like this and an outside antenna that's up, let's say at least 20 feet, maybe higher. The antenna one of the antennas that I have this on is at 45 foot, and another one is at 57 foot. But if you get an outside antenna with some height to it, then it's no problem at all. And it's going to depend on where you are, obviously, in the terrain. But on average, it shouldn't be any problem at all to communicate 30 miles, 40 miles, and reliably, and in some cases further than that, 50 miles, 60 miles. All that's going to depend on how high your antenna is and the repeater's location, how high it is, the elevation where you are, the elevation where the repeater site is. All that comes into play. But the point is that a radio like this is going to get out a lot further than a handheld. The radio I just showed you could also be put inside your vehicle, and with an outside antenna of the vehicle, and you're running for power, you're running it straight off the battery. It won't have as much range as what I have set up here with an outside in the house with an antenna up, say on a tower or some type of pole, because the antenna on your vehicle is not going to be as high, but that will still have more range and get out further than if you had a handheld wherever your car was. Of course, if you go with a radio like I just showed you, it's going to be more expensive. If you have it inside your vehicle, you're going to need an outside antenna for it. You're going to need an antenna for it. If you have it set up in your home, you're going to need some type of power supply. You could actually use a automobile battery for it. And you're going to need an outside antenna and some coax cable to reach to that antenna. So all that is going to cost you more than what the handy-talkie would. But it's going to get out further than what the handy-talkie would. You can buy one of the cheap Chinese-made handy-talkies that are out now for about 30 bucks. And that's the cheapest way that you can get into amateur radio. If you buy a more name brand handy-talkie like what I've got here, this is a 2-meter Kenwood handy-talkie. I bought this about a little over a year ago for around $130. Now, if we're talking about how far a radio can get out, this is not going to get out any further than the cheap $30 Chinese radio. They both have 5 watts, and 5 watts is 5 watts. Even if the Chinese radio had 8 watts, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. Now, there are aftermarket antennas that you can get for a handheld, like what I have here, that will extend the range a little bit, but it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. You're not going to put that on that handy-talkie and suddenly go from communicating 2 to 3 miles to 20 miles. It's not going to make that much difference in the same location. I couldn't tell you how much difference it'll make, but it wouldn't be a huge amount. It's worth investing in for your handy-talkie, but it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. Let's say you get a radio like I showed you over here, but instead of a dual band, it's just a 2-meter radio. You can probably find one of them, and they're basically considered or called a mobile radio, even though you can put that radio, with a power supply, you can put it in your house. But you can get a 50-watt mobile radio like that, 2 meters. I'd say you can get a new one for somewhere in the neighborhood of $150. Now, if you put it inside your house, you're going to have to, like I showed you, you're going to have a power supply. That could be anywhere from $100 to $150 will get you a good enough power supply for it. You're going to need some coax cable to run from the radio to the antenna, depending on how far that run is, as to how much that's going to cost you. But the antenna, you don't have to buy a real expensive antenna. You can make an antenna for that radio. There's Slim Jim antennas that you can make, throw up in a tree, get them up at least maybe 20 feet. That won't be very expensive at all. So why am I suggesting that people don't get a handy-talkie for their first radio? I'm really afraid that some people will get a handy-talkie as their first radio, and they'll become discouraged and dissatisfied, and they'll get out of the hobby. It won't be what they thought it was going to be, and they suddenly realize that they can't talk as far as what they thought they would, and they just give up on the hobby without really giving it much of a chance. So that's why I'm saying that I'll emphasize, if you can afford to spend that much more money to get a radio like this, I would suggest, you're trying to not spend too much to get one that's a 2-meter radio. In most locations, you're going to find more 2-meter repeaters and more traffic on 2 meters than you will on 70 centimeters in most locations. So I would suggest getting a 50-watt 2-meter radio like that if you possibly can, if you can afford it. And you have to make, if you can do that and do it, you have to make the choice, the decision of how you're going to be operating. Would you rather have it in your vehicle? Would you rather have it at home? That just kind of depends on where you think you're going to do most of your operating from. But I'm really, worried that some people, especially with all the cheap Chinese radios that you can get that cheap, that people are thinking, when they get into hobby, that's going to do it for them. And I hate to have to knock some of my fellow ham radio YouTubers, but I see so many YouTube videos that you look at the thumbnail and it's somebody holding up a handy-talkie. And they're making you believe that, that's what you need to get when you get in ham radio. A handy-talkie is a very useful thing. It has its purpose, but it's not really the best radio to have if it's your only radio you have. Later on, if you do start out with a 50-watt radio, like I said, and you may want to get a handy-talkie. There are times, there's different events you might need it at. I know we have a parade here in the town that I live close by, and the Ham Radio Club helps out with communications for that parade, and, you're using handy-talkies. For things like that, a handy-talkie is useful. It has its purpose. But if that's the only radio you have, you are rather limited. And let me say, and I really want to stress this, if you already have your license and all you have is a handy-talkie, and all you have is one of the $30 Chinese handy-talkies, I'm not trying to knock you. I'm not trying to say that you're not a real ham, and I'm not trying to criticize you. I'm just trying to help people, and I'm worried that some people may get out of the hobby right after they get in it if they get discouraged because the handy-talkie won't do what they thought it would. If you are one of those people that's all you have right now, I try to encourage you not to be discouraged I try to tell you to save up your nickels and dimes, and don't let it discourage you, and don't let it make you get out of the hobby. Try to save up your money to eventually get a bigger radio, a 50-watt radio that you can put in the house, that you can put in your vehicle. So that's really the point I'm trying to make, is that I don't want to see people get discouraged and get out of the hobby. Now, there is something you can do, and I may make a video about this later on, that will help a little bit if all you have is an HT, and let's say you want to operate from home. There's a ways that you can hook this up to an outside antenna and get out even further. And we may make another video and show you how to go about doing that. So I hope this has been helpful, and I know I'll probably go and get some feedback from some people that think I'm trying to lead people wrong, or that I'm knocking anybody that only has a handheld. And I'm not. I'm not saying that you're not a real ham. I'm not trying to put you down if all you have is a handy talkie. I'm just trying to hope that people don't get discouraged. If they get into the hobby and at first that's all they have, because I think that could be a case that some people just get discouraged, that the handy talkie is not doing what they thought it would, that ham radio is not what they thought it was, and they get out. So they get out of the hobby. So I hope everybody understands what the point I'm really trying to make is. So anyway, I'll wrap this up there, and till next time, 73 everyone. And if you like this video, be sure and hit the like button, and feel free to subscribe to the channel, as we're almost up to 1,000 subscribers now. So feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Till next time, 73 everyone.